Hello, this is Bobbi Newman, and I'd like to welcome you to this week's Research Minutes, the CPRE Knowledge Hub's weekly podcast where we interview researchers about the latest work being done in the field to help improve education. This week I speak with Quinn, Assistant Professor of Education from the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education, and Tina Cheuk, Doctoral Candidate at the Graduate School of Education at Stanford University, about their CPRE Policy Brief, Public Attitude Towards School Vouchers in the Trump Era. Rand and Tina, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Tell me a little bit about your study.
So our goal was to explore public opinion on school vouchers. Vouchers are subsidies provided to parents to offset private school tuition. And this is a politically contentious method of school reform. Proponents argue that vouchers provide parents with more school choice and that choice is good. On the other hand, opponents argue that vouchers channel public resources into private institutions and pull students who would otherwise attend public schools into private schools. And the research on vouchers and the effect of vouchers has been mixed. Vouchers do not seem to improve academic achievement, but they may improve graduation rates and they may provide a greater sense of school safety and satisfaction among parents. There are different kinds of voucher systems. Vouchers can be publicly funded by the government, or they can be funded by a private entity like a private foundation or a private corporation. Vouchers can also be universally available to all students within its jurisdiction, or they can be targeted to a particular subset of the student population, such as targeted to students from low-income households or students with special needs. And we were interested in understanding support and opposition on school vouchers in the current political moment in the Trump era through various demographic subpopulations. And we were interested in understanding this difference across voucher system types, so public versus private and universal versus targeted.
You used an interesting data set for your work to study those public opinions. Can you tell me a little bit more about that data set?
Yeah. So our data comes from a larger omnibus online survey designed by an interdisciplinary group of researchers at the Laboratory for the Study of American Values at Stanford. And our polling partner was YouGov. And YouGov used this process where they produced a nationally representative sample of 1,000 U.S. adults for the survey. And our data is in two parts. First, we conducted what we call a survey experiment. And here, this is where we randomly assigned these 1,000 respondents to one of four voucher conditions, as mentioned by Rand earlier: private versus public and targeted versus universal. And this random assignment allows us to see if there are statistically significant differences in school voucher support or opposition across these four voucher scenarios. The second part of our data includes demographic variables for all of our respondents. So these include standard variables such as gender, race, income, educational level. But what stands out about this work is our attention to political ideology and religiosity in our respondents. While there have been other polls that looked at how school voucher support is seen in the general demographics, there hasn't been an in-depth look in how partisanship and religion influences public opinions on school vouchers across these four system types. And one last comment I want to make about this work is the timeliness. This poll was conducted in early April of 2017, where the public was likely to be hearing a lot of information about Trump's educational agenda, as well as his choice of Betsy DeVos as his education secretary.
Right, that was that same timing of he also released his budget, right, his proposed budget?
Correct.
Okay, what were some of the key findings?
Between half and nearly 3/5 of all adults express support for school vouchers, depending on the voucher system type. And there is greater support for private over public vouchers, and there's greater support for targeted over universal vouchers. That's the overall across all adults in the United States. Approximately 20% of adults are neutral. They had no opinion, either support or opposition towards vouchers. They were sort of in the middle. And the remainder, about 20 to 30% of adults, depending on the voucher system type again, are opposed to school vouchers. We also identified differences across political ideology and religion subgroups, as Tina mentioned. And Republicans, Trump voters, and political conservatives are more supportive of vouchers across voucher system type than Democrats, Clinton voters, and liberals, and independents are in the middle. So, for example, over half of self-identified liberals are opposed to publicly funded vouchers. And at the other end, over 60% of self-identified conservatives support publicly funded vouchers. We found a similar dichotomy with regard to religion and religiosity. So Protestants and Catholics are more supportive of school vouchers than those who don't consider themselves to be religious. And some of the highest levels of support come from born-again evangelical Christians and from people who consider religion to be very important to their lives. We also found some patterns across race and class. Black and Latino adults are more supportive of public and targeted vouchers than white adults. And the more formal education one has, the less likely he or she will support vouchers, particularly public and universal vouchers. So college degree holders tend to be more skeptical, more opposed to vouchers, especially public and universal vouchers, than those without a college degree. And finally, we found a U-shaped relationship with regard to family income. Adults with family incomes at the low end and at the high end are more supportive of vouchers than those coming from the middle categories of family income between $30,000 and $100,000 a year. And we think some of the support is driven by whether or not the respondent to the survey would be able to make use of the school voucher. So we can imagine that someone who is Catholic or very religious may see an opportunity that vouchers can provide that would allow them to apply that voucher to a Catholic school in the neighborhood, a religious school in the neighborhood. Same thing for low-income families, that a voucher might allow them to move their child from a public school to a private school that they wouldn't otherwise afford. Those are hunches. We don't know the underlying mechanism to these levels of support, but we hope to continue investigating this issue, Tina and I, and hopefully uncover more of these underlying mechanisms to these patterns that we found.
So what implications does your work have for policymakers?
So we know that policymakers rely on research-based evidence to make decisions about school reform, such as vouchers and a whole slew of other issues related to teaching and learning. Yet we also know public opinion matters, especially in this political environment that we're in. And we know that education is and has become even more politicized in our current environment. And we also know that education is highly values-driven. So this opens up the conversation about the role of religion in public education. What does that mean? And how does people with different religious views view public education and the role of government spending? And the research findings here also help policymakers understand how the diversity of Americans view vouchers at sort of this moment in time this year in 2017 across these system types, public versus private, universal versus targeted, and really think about how are they going to negotiate or navigate public opinion in light of the existing research on school vouchers.
Well, thank you both for joining me today. I really appreciate your insights into your findings, and I look forward to reading more about the study and your policy briefs that will be out shortly. Thank you again
for having us, Bobbi.